What if the deepest sorrow you have ever felt is actually, just carving out space inside you to hold an even greater joy? And what if the very things you think of as your own, like your children, your possessions, or your deeply held beliefs, don't actually belong to you at all?
I mean, it completely upends how we're taught to view the world. It really challenges the very foundation of ownership, of attachment, and, how we measure a successful life in general.
Yeah, it really does. If you actually take those ideas seriously, it means dismantling almost everything society tells us about what it means to be secure.
Absolutely. It's terrifying, but also incredibly liberating.
Well, welcome back to our community, everyone. Today we are taking a deep dive into a text that has fundamentally altered the way millions of people understand the human experience. We are talking about Kahlil Gibran's 1923 masterpiece, The Prophet.
It is such a phenomenal piece of literature.
It really is. So, welcome to the Book Nook. Today we're going to explore how Gibran's poetic, almost mystical wisdom on love, work, pain, and freedom can radically shift how we live our modern lives today.
And to really grasp the impact of this book, we need to set the scene a little bit. The Prophet is structured around this really brilliant narrative frame.
Right, the story of Almustafa.
Exactly. We meet this man, Almustafa, who is referred to as the Chosen and the Beloved, and he has been living in the city of Orphalese for 12 long years.
Kind of an exile, right?
Yeah, essentially in exile. He's been waiting for his ship to finally return and bear him back to the island of his birth.
Which is, 12 years is a massive chunk of a human life. You can imagine the roots he's put down in Orphalese, the relationships he's built, the daily routines.
Oh, for sure.
Even while he's always looking out at the horizon for this ship, he is a stranger, but he's a deeply embedded stranger in this community.
That's a great way to put it. And in the 12th year, the ship finally arrives. It cuts through the mist. But as Al-Mustafa prepares to leave, he doesn't just feel relief.
No, it's way more complicated than that.
Right. He feels this profound, bittersweet sadness. He actually says it isn't just a garment he's casting off, but a skin he is tearing with his own hands.
Wow, tearing his own skin. That is so visceral.
It is. And as he walks toward the harbor, the townspeople leave their fields, they leave their vineyards, and they gather around him. They really don't want him to go.
Of course not. They love him.
Yeah. But led by a seeress named Almitra, who's actually the first. So Almitra asks him for one final gift.
The ultimate parting gift.
Exactly. She asks him to share his ultimate truths, to disclose them to themselves, basically, and speak of everything between birth and death before he boards that ship.
And what follows is just this incredible pouring out of wisdom. It's a series of 26 prose poetry essays, essentially answering the townspeople's questions about the most fundamental aspects of the human condition.
It covers just about everything you could imagine.
It does. And for everyone listening, if you ever get your hands on a physical copy of this original 1923 edition, you have to look at the artwork. It features 12 original illustrations drawn by Gibran himself.
They are absolutely stunning.
So beautiful. It just underscores how deeply personal, how visceral this work was for him. He isn't just theorizing. He is trying to visually and verbally map the human soul.
And what's really fascinating about that map is that Gibran isn't offering a rigid set of rules.
No, not at all.
Like, he isn't handing down a dogma or some sort of 10-step self-help program. He is offering a lens, a way of seeing the profound interconnectedness of things that we usually try to keep entirely separate in our minds.
So let's look through that lens, starting right where Almitra starts. The very first thing she asks him to speak about is love.
A huge topic to start with.
Huge. And right out of the gate, Gibran offers a view of love that is incredibly countercultural to us today. We usually think of love as this soft, comfortable, safe harbor.
Right, like the rom-com ending.
Exactly, the warm blanket on a cold day. But Al-Mustafa describes love as both the crown and the crucifixion.
Yeah, that is one of the most striking paradoxes in the text. He says that when love beckons to you, you must follow him, even though his ways are hard and steep.
It's not supposed to be easy.
No, not at all. And he uses this incredibly vivid, almost violent agricultural imagery. He says, love gathers you like sheaves of corn. It threshes you to make you naked, sifts you to free you from your husks, grinds you to whiteness, and kneads you until you are pliant.
Okay, threshing, sifting, grinding, kneading. That sounds absolutely terrifying.
It does.
It sounds like destruction, honestly.
Well, it does sound like destruction if you associate your identity purely with the husk. But if we connect this to the psychological process of deep intimacy, Gibran is really describing the dismantling of the ego.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the purpose of all this threshing and grinding isn't to destroy your core. It's to break down the walls around it. It's to prepare you for what he calls God's sacred feast.
So it's breaking down our defenses.
Exactly. Love strips away the defenses, the masks, the superficial layers of who we think we are to present to the world. And he gives a very stark warning. He says, if you only seek love's peace and love's pleasure, you are better off covering your nakedness and leaving the threshing floor entirely.
Because if you just want the easy parts, if you just want someone to split the rent with and watch movies with on a Friday night, you enter what he calls a seasonless world.
Right, a world without real depth.
Yeah, where he says you laugh, but not all of your laughter, and weep, but not all of your tears. You're basically living a half-life.
It's so true.
It makes me think of modern dating culture, honestly, where the minute there is friction or a difficult conversation, people just swipe to the next person. We want the crown, but we totally reject the crucifixion.
We want the reward without the work.
Exactly. But Gibran is saying, kind of like a skilled gardener pruning a tree, the process is going to feel violent to the branches being cut off.
Yeah.
But that aggressive pruning, that removal of the dead weight, is the absolute only way to encourage the tree to grow upward toward the sun and bear actual fruit.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. And it really highlights the growth aspect of this threshing, which actually leads to what I think is Gibran's core thesis on the nature of love.
Oh, which part?
He says, love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love.
Wow. Yes.
It's just a massive, radical departure from the idea of romantic ownership that permeates so much of our culture, both back in the 20s and today.
Right. I mean, we literally use the language of property all the time. Be mine, I'm yours, you belong to me.
Exactly.
But Gibran is saying that true love cannot exist in a state of possession, which really raises a massive question when we get to the very next topic the townspeople ask about, which is marriage.
Oh, definitely.
Because marriage, legally and socially, is often framed exactly as a type of ownership, or at least a total merging of two people. But when the master is asked about marriage, he says, let there be spaces in your togetherness.
Yeah, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. He explicitly warns against making a bond of love into a fetter, like a chain.
Right, a trap.
Instead, he says it should be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. You are meant to fill each other's cups, but crucially, do not drink from the same cup. Give each other of your bread, but don't eat from the same loaf.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Or at least demand we look at the logistics of it. Because this sounds incredibly difficult in practice.
It is difficult.
Society, movies, even our tax codes, they all teach us that marriage means two people becoming one. The ultimate goal is this total enmeshment. We share a bank account, we share a mortgage, we raise kids together, we coordinate calendars.
We basically merge our lives.
Yeah. And Gibran says the strings of a lute are alone, even though they quiver with the same music. But practically speaking, how does a modern couple share all the heavy machinery of a life while acting like two separate strings? Doesn't this constant emphasis on space just lead to emotional distance or living like roommates?
Well, that is the exact trap we fall into. We confuse differentiation with distance. Psychological enmeshment is often born of fear.
Fear of what?
It's the fear of losing the other person, so you try to absorb them or be absorbed by them so they can't leave. You surrender your hobbies, your independent thoughts, your boundaries.
You just become a collective we.
Right. But Gibran offers a different structural image to explain how you can support a shared life without merging into one blob. He says, stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow.
Oh, I love that. So the temple is the shared life, the mortgage, the family, the vows.
Exactly. If you take two pillars and smash them together into one giant column in the center, what happens? The roof of the temple caves in.
Oh, wow.
You lose your structural integrity as individuals, and therefore you actually weaken the relationship. The oak and the cypress are a great biological example, too. They have completely different root systems and completely different canopy structures.
And they need different nutrients, I'm sure.
Right. If they grow too close, they block each other's sunlight and strangle each other's roots. Sharing a life means standing on the same ground, holding up the same sky, but maintaining the distinct individual strength that made you capable of holding up a roof in the first place.
That distinction between enmeshment and true partnership makes so much sense. You really need that space to grow to your full height. And it changes how you view the other person.
Yeah.
They aren't there to complete you. They're there to parallel you.
Yes, parallel growth.
And it reminds me of what he says later on about friendship. He says, a friend is your needs answered, but he specifically notes that a friend is never a place to simply kill time.
Yeah, he says, for what is your friend that you should seek him with hours to kill? Seek him always with hours to live.
I just think that's so profound.
It really is. Friendship, in Gibran's view, isn't about mere distraction or filling an empty void in your schedule because you can't stand to be alone. It's a field you sow with love and reap with thanksgiving. Its sole purpose is the deepening of the spirit.
It's an active, conscious, parallel growth, just like the oak and the cypress. But, if we think the idea of not owning our spouses or our friends is hard, nowhere is this idea of non-ownership more intensely challenged than when a woman holding a babe against her bosom asks him to speak of children.
Oh, absolutely. This might be the most famous and, for some people, the most confronting passage in the entire book.
Without a doubt.
Almustafa replies to this mother, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself."
He says, they come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. That gives me chills every time I read it.
It completely dismantles the biological entitlement that parents often unconsciously feel. Throughout history, and definitely still today, there is an assumption that because you gave birth to this child, they are an extension of you.
Right, like a mini version of yourself.
Exactly. Meant to fulfill your unlived dreams, validate your parenting, or carry on your specific political or religious way of thinking.
We see this everywhere. The intense pressure of modern parenting. The helicopter parents, the tiger moms, mapping out their toddler's Ivy League trajectory.
It's exhausting just to watch.
It is. There's this overwhelming, crushing anxiety that if you don't mold your child perfectly into this specific shape, you've failed. And your child's failure is your failure. But Gibran uses this incredible analogy to shatter that anxiety. He introduces the archer and the bow.
Yes, the bow and arrow metaphor.
He says, you are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer, which represents the infinite or life itself, bends the bow with his might so that the arrows may go swift and far.
Think about the physics of that metaphor for a second.
Yeah.
What is required of the bow? Stability, tension.
Right, it has to hold its ground.
The bow must stay firmly rooted in the present, bearing the strain of the pull, while the arrow flies into a future that the bow can never reach. Gibran says you may house their bodies, but not their souls, because their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams.
I just want to pause on how deeply liberating that is for parents listening. He says you can give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts.
It's a huge relief, honestly.
It really is. You shouldn't seek to make them like you, because life doesn't go backward. Your only job is to be a stable, loving bow. Let the archer do the bending, let the tension happen, and let the arrow fly. It reframes parenting from a desperate act of creation and ownership to a profound act of stewardship.
Stewardship is the perfect word. You are temporarily entrusted with this life, but it belongs to the infinite path of tomorrow. You are the launch pad, not the destination.
So if we are forced to relinquish this intense biological grip on the human beings we bring into the world, what happens when we apply that same lens of non-ownership to inanimate objects, to our money, our possessions? When the townspeople ask Almustafa about giving, he makes a clear distinction right away about what true generosity actually is.
He says that giving your possessions is actually giving very little. It's only when you give of yourself that you truly give.
Which is much harder.
Much harder. But he goes further by analyzing the psychology of hoarding. He challenges the fear-based mentality of keeping everything you earn, asking what your possessions are other than things you keep and guard for fear you might need them tomorrow.
And he has this brilliant, slightly mocking image for that. He talks about the overprudent dog burying bones in the trackless sand as he follows the pilgrims to the holy city.
It's such a great visual.
It is. Like, what good is a buried bone going to do him miles away in the trackless sand? He says the fear of need is actually the need itself. If your well is full, but you are dreading being thirsty, you are already suffering from an unquenchable thirst.
And that unquenchable thirst is the hallmark of the scarcity mindset. It's the billionaire who works themselves to death to make another billion because deep down they are terrified of poverty. Gibran is trying to shift the listener to an abundance mindset.
Right.
And this raises a very thorny question about how we view charity and who we actually deem deserving of our help.
Oh, because we love to play judge. He explicitly calls this out. He says, You often say, I would give, but only to the deserving. I really have to ask you to break this down because this feels so radically out of step with a modern, hyper-transactional society.
It really is.
Today, we constantly evaluate the ROI, the return on investment, of our generosity. We want receipts. We want to know the person isn't going to waste our money. But Gibran points to nature and says, the trees in your orchard don't say that. The flocks in your pasture don't say that. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish.
It's a profound challenge to our moral accounting systems. Gibran suggests that life itself gives unto life, and you are merely a witness, an instrument of that giving.
Just a conduit.
Exactly. If someone is worthy enough to be alive, as he puts it, worthy to receive his days and his nights, then they are worthy of receiving from you. He says it is not for you to figure out if someone deserves it, because God is the one who ultimately receives it anyway.
He even flips the power dynamic completely here. We usually think of the giver as the benevolent savior and the receiver as the indebted victim. But Gibran says there is immense courage, confidence, and charity in the act of receiving. The receiver allows the giver to fulfill their nature.
Yes. He asks the receiver not to take on a burden of gratitude, because that turns the gift into a debt.
Right.
If you assume a yoke of gratitude, you are doubting the generosity of the earth itself. It takes the hierarchy out of philanthropy. You aren't stepping down from a pedestal to hand someone a crumb. You are both participating in the natural flow of life's abundance.
And participating in that flow brings us directly into his philosophy on work. We just talked about money and charity, but how do we spend the majority of our waking hours getting that money? He says, work is love made visible.
This is one of the most beautiful yet practically challenging concepts in the whole book. He argues that when you work, you are a flute through whose heart the whispering of the hours turns to music.
I love that imagery.
Right. To be idle is to become dumb and silent, to step out of life's procession. But crucially, he does not glorify just any toil. The modern grind set, hustle culture, that is not what he means at all. He insists that work must be infused with love.
And what does it actually mean to work with love? He paints these vivid pictures. He says it is to weave the cloth with threads drawn from your heart, even as if your beloved were to wear that cloth, or to build a house with affection, as if your beloved were going to live in it.
And the alternative he presents is stark. He says if you bake bread with indifference, you bake a bitter bread that feeds but half man's hunger. If you grudge the crushing of the grapes, your grudge distills a poison in the wine.
This speaks so directly to the existential dread of the modern workplace.
Oh, absolutely.
We have all these terms now, quiet quitting, burnout, the gig economy, extreme alienation from our labor. We have millions of people sitting in cubicles or working supply lines, just baking bitter bread every single day.
It's clocking in and clocking out.
Clocking in and clocking out with complete indifference or outright distaste for what they are doing. And Gibran says something almost shocking about this. He says, if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take alms of those who work with joy.
It sounds incredibly extreme to our modern ears, right? To say you should quit your job and become a beggar if you don't love your work.
Yeah, try telling your landlord that.
Exactly. But he is pointing to the spiritual toxicity of resentful labor. He is saying that putting poisoned wine and bitter bread into the community, putting out work that is cynical, rushed, or hateful, actually harms the collective.
It poisons everyone.
Work, in its truest form, is the mechanism by which we bind ourselves, to one another, and to a higher purpose. When that link is broken by indifference, the whole community spiritually starves.
But, maybe the reason we are baking that bitter bread is because we aren't working for the love of the craft anymore. We're working just to fund our comforts, to build bigger walls.
Yeah.
Which brings up this incredibly stark warning Gibran issues when the townspeople ask him about houses and the places we live. He talks about the lust for comfort.
This is perhaps one of his most prophetic warnings about consumerism. He describes the lust for comfort as a stealthy thing. It enters the house as a guest, then it becomes a host, and finally, it becomes a master.
Guest to host to master.
And it doesn't stop there. Once it is the master, it becomes a tamer, making puppets of your larger desires with a hook and scourge.
That progression is chilling. We see this with the hedonic treadmill of modern life. We build these magnificent, comfortable lives. Smart homes, climate control, instant delivery, endless convenience.
We want everything perfectly curated.
Right. We work the job we hate just to afford the softer couch. But Gibran warns that this comfort actually murders the passion of the soul and then walks grinning in the funeral.
Because the soul is wild and comfort is a cage. He says we shouldn't build tombs for the living. He wants our houses to be not an anchor, but a mast.
A mast like on a ship.
Exactly. Something that helps us navigate the world, not something that ties us down in fear. The wanderer in you, the boundless part of you, cannot be contained by four walls and a ceiling.
He carries this same logic over to clothes. He says clothes conceal much of our beauty, but they don't hide the unbeautiful parts of us. And he reminds us that the earth delights to feel our bare feet, and the winds long to play with our hair.
He's constantly trying to strip away the artificial barriers we place between ourselves and the raw, vulnerable experience of life.
And when he speaks to the merchants about buying and selling, he brings this entire material section to a close.
Right. He acknowledges that the earth yields her fruit, and exchanging these gifts is a natural way to bring abundance. But he warns that unless the exchange is done in love and kindly justice, it just leads some to greed and others to hunger.
He insists on invoking the master spirit of the earth to sanctify the scales. And he specifically says not to let the barren-handed, those who would sell just their words for your labor, take advantage of the actual toilers. Even in the marketplace, there must be a recognition of mutual humanity. No one should leave the marketplace with empty hands.
It's a vision of commerce that isn't based on extraction or exploitation, but on mutual sustenance.
But here's the catch with all of this. With the commerce, the houses, the clothes, we usually chase all of that material comfort to insulate ourselves from pain. We think if we get the right house, the right bank account, we can lock out sorrow.
If only it were that simple.
Right. But as we move into the internal mechanics of the human psyche in Gibran's text, he completely obliterates the illusion that we can or even should avoid pain. When a woman asks him about joy and sorrow, he immediately breaks down the binary between them.
We treat joy and sorrow as enemies. We try to maximize one and eradicate the other. But Gibran says, your joy is your sorrow unmasked. They are not opposites at all. They are made of the exact same material.
They are inseparable.
They come together. When one is sitting at your board eating with you, the other is asleep on your bed.
And this is where he introduces what might be my favorite metaphor in the entire book. The metaphor of the cup. He asks, is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? I want everyone listening to really visualize that.
It's so powerful.
The exact same physical vessel that holds your greatest moments of ecstatic joy, the wine, had to be fired and scorched in an oven at thousands of degrees to become capable of holding anything at all.
Because unfired clay just melts back into mud when you pour liquid into it.
Exactly. The fire, the sorrow, is what gives you structure. He says, the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain.
It is a profound framework for the psychology of grief. It reframes suffering not as a meaningless void or a punishment, but as an excavation. The sorrow is hollowing you out. It is carving deep into your center, but it is doing so to increase your capacity for future joy. When you are weeping, he says you are actually weeping for that which has been your delight.
It makes me think about losing a pet. You adopt a dog, knowing full well that in 10 or 15 years, your heart is going to be absolutely shattered.
Oh, completely.
But the immense gut-wrenching sorrow you feel on that final day is exactly proportional to the immense joy that animal brought into your life. The sorrow is just the joy turned inside out. If you try to avoid the sorrow by never loving the dog, you shrink your capacity for joy to zero.
Exactly. You remain an unfired cup, incapable of holding the wine. And just as he harmonizes joy and sorrow, he does the exact same thing with reason and passion.
Right.
Society and many philosophical traditions often treat these as warring factions, the angel of logic on one shoulder and the devil of emotion on the other.
Right. We're told to use our reason to suppress our passions. But Gibran acknowledges that the soul is often a battlefield between judgment and appetite. His solution, however, is not to have one defeat the other. He compares the soul to a seafaring vessel.
And in this metaphor, reason is the rudder and passion is the sails.
Think about how useless one is without the other. If your sails are broken and you only have a rudder, you just sit stagnant in the water. You have perfect direction, but absolutely no momentum. Reason, ruling alone, is a confining force.
But if your rudder is broken and you only have sails, you toss about helplessly and eventually crash into the rocks. Passion, unattended, is a flame that burns to its own destruction.
What's incredible here is his prescription. He doesn't say, tame your passion with reason. He says, Exalt your reason to the height of passion that it may sing, and let it direct your passion with reason, that your passion may live through its own daily resurrection.
You are supposed to treat them as two equally honored guests in your house. God rests in reason, but God moves in passion. You need both to navigate the sea.
It's a beautiful precursor to modern concepts like emotional intelligence or even dialectical behavior therapy, where we're taught to find the wise mind by integrating emotional truth with logical facts, rather than repressing one in favor of the other.
Exactly. It's about integration.
And navigating that sea of the self inevitably brings us to pain, not just sorrow over a loss, but the internal pain of growth. Gibran has a very specific definition here. He says, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Just like the stone of a fruit must break so its heart can stand in the sun, we must know pain to grow.
He introduces this concept of the physician within. He says much of our pain is actually self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Because it is guided by the tender hand of the unseen, he urges us to drink the remedy in silence and tranquility, trusting the process of the breaking shell.
The cup that burns your lips was fashioned of clay moistened with the potter's own tears. I mean, the empathy in that image is staggering. And through this pain, through this breaking of the shell, we arrive at self-knowledge. But he offers a really important caveat about finding truth on this journey.
Yes, and it's a vital warning against dogma. He says the self is a sea, boundless and measureless. Because of that, you should never confidently proclaim, I have found the truth. You should only ever say, I have found a truth.
I have met the soul walking upon my path. Because a soul doesn't walk a straight line, and it doesn't grow like a reed. He says it unfolds itself, like a lotus of countless petals.
I love that image.
I love that so much too. It takes the pressure off, having to figure it all out definitively by the time you're 30, You are just exploring one petal at a time. The internal landscape is infinite.
It encourages profound intellectual and spiritual humility. You can chart your current position, but you cannot map the entire ocean.
But it's one thing to have that humility and that grace for yourself, for your own unfolding lotus of a soul. It's an entirely different and frankly much more difficult thing to extend that grace outward, especially to the people in society who have done real harm. Which brings us to the way Gibran views society, morality, and the collective.
This is a heady section.
It is, and I have to be honest, this is where we hit the most challenging, provocative, and controversial chapter in the entire book, the chapter on crime and punishment.
It is absolutely the chapter that requires the most careful unpacking, because on its face, it is deeply unsettling.
Really unsettling.
When a city judge asks him about crime, Almustafa begins by asserting the absolute interconnectedness of all people. He says that the holy and righteous cannot rise beyond the highest which is in each of you, and crucially, the wicked and the weak cannot fall lower than the lowest which is in you also.
A single leaf turns not yellow, but with the silent knowledge of the whole tree.
Yeah.
So he is saying that the wrongdoer cannot do wrong without the hidden will of everyone. We are all walking together like a procession.
Right.
When someone falls, they fall for those behind them as a caution, but they also fall for those ahead of them who were faster and stronger but didn't bother to remove the stumbling stone.
That establishes a baseline of collective responsibility. It echoes sociological views on how poverty, systemic neglect, and environment breed crime. But then he takes it a step further into very difficult territory. He says, the murdered is not unaccountable for his own murder, and the robbed is not blameless in being robbed.
Okay, I really have to stop and push back on this extremely hard. Because to a modern reader, this sounds exactly like victim blaming.
Oh, totally. It does.
It sounds like he is saying if your house gets broken into, it's your fault. If you are the victim of violence, you brought it on yourself.
Yeah.
How do we grapple with this without just discarding the text? Because frankly, it sounds dangerous.
It's a very valid, necessary challenge. If we read this as a literal legal framework for a courtroom, it is highly problematic and, as you said, dangerous. But we have to remember the altitude from which Gibran is writing.
He's not writing a penal code.
Right. He's not writing a legal code. He is writing a mystical, cosmic text. He is viewing humanity from an absolute transcendent vantage point where the illusion of separation just doesn't exist. At that level, he is arguing that the binaries of pure innocent victim and pure guilty perpetrator dissolve into a single complex web of human shadow and cause and effect.
So it's about the collective shadow.
Yes. He says the righteous and the wicked stand together before the sun like black and white threads woven into the exact same cloth.
So when the black thread breaks, you don't just blame the thread. The weaver has to look at the whole cloth and examine the tension of the loom itself.
Exactly. He is profoundly challenging the self-righteousness of the judge and the punisher. He asks the judge, "What judgment do you pronounce on the man who is honest in the flesh, but a thief in spirit? How do you punish someone whose remorse is already greater than their misdeeds?"
That's a powerful question.
He even says that what we call evil is just good, tortured by its own hunger and thirst. When good is starving, when it is desperate, it will drink from dead waters.
He's forcing the listener and the judge to recognize their own capacity for both the highest good and the lowest evil. Carl Jung talked about this with the concept of the shadow, the suppressed, dark parts of our psyche. Gibran says the erect and the fallen are but one man standing in twilight.
It's an incredibly demanding level of empathy.
It really is. He's essentially saying you cannot cleanly amputate the bad people from society to make yourselves pure because they are a manifestation of the society's own hidden shadows.
And that skepticism of the punisher naturally bleeds into his views on man-made laws. When asked about laws, he is quite playful, almost dismissive. He compares man-made laws to children playing by the ocean, building sand towers with constancy, only to destroy them with laughter while the ocean brings more sand.
But he gets very serious and very sharp when he talks about the people who treat these sand towers as sacred text, the people who use laws as chisels to carve life into their own likeness.
The hypocrites.
Yeah, he calls that the hypocrites. The cripple who hates dancers, the ox who loves his yoke and thinks the free elk in the forest is a vagrant, the old serpent who can't shed his skin and calls everyone else naked. These people see only their own limitations, their own shadows, and their shadows become their laws.
They project their internal rigidities onto the external world and call it justice. And this ties directly into his definition of freedom. An orator asks him to speak of freedom, and Almustafa says he has seen people worship their own freedom like slaves humbling themselves before a tyrant.
He argues that true freedom isn't about simply abolishing an unjust law or dethroning a political despot. He says, if you abolish a law, it was written with your own hand on your own forehead. If you dethrone a despot, you have to first destroy the throne he erected within you. How can a tyrant rule the free unless there is already a tyranny in their own freedom?
Gibran is arguing that the heaviest chains are the ones we place on ourselves. We chain ourselves to our egos, to our lust for comfort, to our resentments. He says, in truth, that which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains, though its links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes.
So freedom isn't just doing whatever you want.
Exactly. If your idea of freedom is just the ability to consume endlessly or avoid all responsibility, you are still a slave. True freedom isn't a state of having no cares or griefs. It's when those things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them naked and unbound.
It's the realization that the things we desire and the things we dread are moving within us in a constant half-embrace. You can't just hack off the parts of yourself you don't like to become free. True freedom is the integration of the whole self.
And maybe that's the ultimate internal tyranny. The belief that we are somehow cut off, separate, finite, that we end at our skin and time ends with the clock. Because as we reach the climax of the book, the ship is fully ready, the day is ending, and Gibran pulls the lens back to the absolute furthest vantage point, the transcendent.
Right. He addresses time, religion, beauty, and ultimately death.
He essentially dissolves every remaining boundary human beings have constructed. When an astronomer asks about time, Almustafa notes how absurd it is that we try to measure the measureless. We try to sit on the bank of a stream and watch it flow, trying to carve it up into hours and seasons.
But the timeless part of us knows that yesterday is just today's memory, and tomorrow is today's dream.
He equates time with love. It is undivided and paceless. If you must measure time into seasons, he says, let today embrace the past with remembrance and the future with longing. And this dissolution of boundaries is most powerfully evident when an old priest asks him to speak of religion.
Al-Mustafa's response is basically, have I spoken of anything else today? He flatly rejects the idea that religion is a compartment of life. You can't say, this hour is for God on Sunday and the rest of the week is for my ruthless business practices.
He says, he who wears his morality but as his best garment were better naked. Your daily life is your temple and your religion. When you enter it, you take everything with you. The plow, the forge, the mallet, the lute. You don't need to be a solver of riddles to know God.
You just have to look around.
Yeah, you just look around and see him, playing with your children, walking in the clouds, stretching his arms in the lightning, smiling in the flowers.
God is the winged self inside of us. Which brings us to the final beautiful synthesis on beauty itself. A poet asks of beauty, And Almustafa clarifies that beauty is not a need. It's not a mouth thirsting or an empty hand stretched forth. It is an ecstasy.
People often confuse beauty with aesthetic pleasure or desire. But Gibran says, it is not the image you would see nor the song you would hear, but rather an image you see though you close your eyes and a song you hear though you shut your ears.
Beauty is life, unveiling her holy face.
And then he delivers that incredible mind-bending line, beauty is eternity gazing at itself in a mirror. But you are eternity and you are the mirror.
You are eternity and you are the mirror. It is breathtaking. The vastness we are looking for out in the universe is staring right back at us. And this profound realization prepares the crowd for the inevitable final question asked by Almitra, the seeress who started it all. We would ask now of death.
He tells them that to know the secret of death, they must seek it in the heart of life. The owl, whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day, cannot unveil the mystery of light. Life and death are one, just as the river and the sea are one.
The fear of death, he says, is just the trembling of a shepherd standing before a king who is about to honor him. It's a joyful trembling beneath the fear. What is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun, to free the breath from its restless tide so it can rise and expand and seek God unencumbered?
Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance. It is a vision of death, not as a terrifying end, not as a punishment, but as a vast, expansive release back into the infinite from which we came.
And now, it is evening in the text. The water lily is closing upon its own tomorrow. Almustafa descends the steps of the temple. The people follow him to the ship. He stands on the deck and gives his farewell to the city of Orphalese.
He tells them that he must go with the wind. He reminds them that wanderers, forever seeking the lonelier way, never begin a day where they ended another. But he makes a promise. He says if his voice fades in their ears, he will come again with a richer heart. Know, therefore, that from the greater silence I shall return.
He compares himself to the mist. He says the mist that drifts away at dawn doesn't just disappear. It rises, gathers into a cloud, and then falls down as rain. He says he has mirrored their summits and their valleys. He has carried the laughter of their children and the tears of their youth. And then he signals the seamen. They weigh anchor. The ship begins to move, and a great cry arises from the people into the dusk.
But Almitra, the seeress who first asked him to speak, is silent. The book ends with her standing alone upon the seawall, watching the ship vanish into the mist, holding on to his promise. A little while, a moment of rest upon the wind, and another woman shall bear me.
It is such a cinematic, emotionally resonant ending. You can picture the mist, the fading ship, the silence on the seawall. So, after unpacking all of this, from the threshing of love to the unblaming of the victim, from the bitter bread to the river of death, what does this all mean for us? Why does a book of prose poetry from 1923 still matter so deeply today?
It matters because it is a radical manual for deep integration. We live in a world that is obsessed with binaries and separation. Good and evil, self and other, joy and sorrow, work and life. We are taught to categorize, to own, and to defend. Gibran strips away all of our societal conditioning about ownership and punishment and replaces it with a vision of radical, unavoidable interconnectedness.
This book is for anyone who feels trapped by those rigid binaries. If you are exhausted by the transactional, ROI-driven nature of modern life, if you are facing a major transition, if you are struggling with the anxiety of letting a child grow up and make their own choices, or if you're grieving a profound loss, this book offers a sanctuary. It reminds us that we are the stable bow, not the flying arrow. We are the cup being fired in the oven so we can hold more joy.
It is a reminder that the vastness we desperately seek out in the world is actually contained within us. He says early in the book that the vast man inside us is a giant oak tree covered in apple blossoms. His might binds us to the earth, but his fragrance lifts us into space. We are not just our jobs or our houses or our anxieties. We are the mirror of eternity.
That is beautifully said and the perfect place to land. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through Orphalese today. We invite you to subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss our deep dives into the books that shape our souls.
There is always more to learn, and exploring these perspectives together, challenging these ideas and applying them, truly enriches our understanding our own lives.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final thread to pull on. Gibran tells us that when we work with love, we bind ourselves to each other and to God. Look at the tasks in front of you today. Are you baking a bitter bread, or are you weaving cloth as if your beloved were going to wear it?